Today we're continuing our little focus on the successful family, and we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, text 5 of the 14th chapter of the 7th canto. So this chapter is Ideal Family Life. And our specific focus in this class is on simple living. We heard in the previous class the basic principle for the successful family, which is to use the fruits of one's work in the family context for the pleasure of Krishna. And in order to understand how to do that, therefore the householder, the family person, associates with sadhus, and they do that in a mood of great respect. And in that association and in that mood, they then hear about Krishna and his incarnations from the Shastra, such as Srimad Bhagavatam. And in this way, the family person can gradually become detached from affection for the family members. Now, this is the material affection which is naturally there in family life. So Narada said that just as a man awakens from a dream, if the householder, the family person, follows these guidelines that he's given, then they will gradually awaken from that dream of material identification, the dream of the concentrated family, or kind of limiting one's understanding of the family to just a few people, because ultimately and actually we're all part of the universal family. We're all part of Krishna's family. So that's what it means to wake up from the dream of material affection, to actually see ourselves and all living entities as part of the universal family. So that that happens gradually, generally, if the family person follows the advice given at the beginning of this chapter by Narada to Yudhishthira Maharaj. So we covered that in some detail in the last class. And in this class, we go on to text number 5 in the chapter, and we hear about the relationship between the Varna and the ashram. So if you may remember in the first canto how Srila Prabhupada explains that the Varnas and ashrams are related and they're interdependent. One is dependent on the other. So that's why it's being mentioned here, the relationship in this next section we'll read between the Varna and the ashram, because often we talk about ashrams but we don't talk about Varnas, which is something like dealing with half the picture. As Prabhupada says, one is dependent on the other. And in that section he explains how the we briefly covered this in the last class, but the householder ashram is for one who's attached to material life. The vanaprastha and sannyas ashrams are for those who are detached from material life. And the brahmachari ashram is the training ground for both the attached and the detached. So that's how the ashrams are supposed to work and facilitate people at different levels of spiritual advancement, people at different ages as well in their life. And Technically, the brahmacharis, the vanaprasthas and sannyasis are brahmanas. Of course, the brahmacharis haven't necessarily figured out what they are, what their varna is, but that's the purpose of the brahmachari ashram. At least that's one of the purposes, to figure that out. But for practical purposes, they're living as brahmanas. They're living on charity, as the brahmana does, and certainly the vanaprasthas and certainly the sannyasis live on charity. So those three ashrams are just limited to that one varna of the brahmana's varna. Whereas the grhastha ashram has 4 varnas, and therefore it's much broader in its scope. And generally, householders will be working to earn their livelihood in some kind of way, either working for a boss, or they're in business, or they're doing some kind of agriculture as a business, or they'll be some kind of political leader or military person, or they'll be a teacher. But this principle that we're going to hear about now of simple living will cover all of those variations on the varna for the householder person, for the family person. And this is very important to understand in the context of our theme of the successful family, because inherently family life is, generally speaking, much more complicated because of the participants in the family, or particularly the adults, being engaged in some kind of employment or work in the world. So that just makes things inherently more complex. And that complexity, it needs to be approached with the proper mindset in order for the family to actually be successful and follow the previous advice of Narada, which is to associate with saintly persons and to hear with great respect about Krishna. So if the proper mindset is not there in relation to one's occupation, then that purpose will be minimized or non-existent. So this is why Narada is now going to explain the proper mindset of how the household person, the family person, relates to his or her occupation. So we'll start here with text number 5. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, Chapter 14, Ideal Family Life. This is text number 5. I'll just read it. Yavad artam upasino dehe gehe chapanditaha virakto raktavat tatra nriloke naratam yasait. Yavat artam, as much endeavour for one's livelihood as necessary. Upasina, earning. Dehe, in the body. Gehe, in family matters. Cha, also. Pandita, one who is learned. Virakta, not at all attached. Raktavat, as if very much attached. Tatra, in this. Nriloke, human society. Naratam, the human form of life. Nyasait, one should depict. Translation. While working to earn his livelihood as much as necessary to maintain body and soul together, one who is actually learned should live in human society unattached to family affairs, although externally appearing very much attached. Purport. This is the picture of ideal family life. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Roy about the goal of life, Ramananda Roy described it in different ways according to the recommendations of the revealed scriptures. And finally, Sri Ramananda Roy explained that one may stay in his own position, whether as a Brahmana a Shudra or a sannyasi or whatever, but one must try to inquire about life's goal. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. This is the proper utilization of the human form of life. When one misses the gift of the human form by unnecessarily indulging in the animal propensities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and does not try to get out of the clutches of Maya, which subjects one to repeated birth, death, old age, and disease, one is again punished by being forced to descend to the lower species and undergo evolution according to the laws of nature. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashaha. Being completely under the grip of material nature, the living entity must evolve again from the lower species to the higher species, until he at last returns to human life and gets the chance to be freed from the material clutches. A wise man, however, learns from the Shastras and Guru that we living entities are all eternal, but are put into troublesome conditions because of associating with different modes under the laws of material nature. He therefore concludes that in the human form of life, he should not endeavour for unnecessary necessities, but should live a very simple life, just maintaining body and soul together. Certainly one requires some means of livelihood, and according to one's varna and asrama, this means of livelihood is prescribed in the Shastras. One should be satisfied with this. Therefore, instead of hankering for more and more money, a sincere devotee of the Lord tries to invent some ways to earn his livelihood, and when he does so, Krishna helps him. Earning one's livelihood, therefore, is not a problem. The real problem is how to get free from the bondage of birth, death, and old age. Attaining this freedom and not inventing unnecessary necessities is the basic principle of Vedic civilization. One should be satisfied with whatever means of life come automatically. The modern materialistic civilization is just the opposite of the ideal civilization. Every day the so-called leaders of modern society invent something contributing to a cumbersome way of life that implicates people more and more in the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Narada Muni then begins his advice about how the successful family person deals with the world, so to speak, in terms of maintaining his family. So he says, while working to earn his livelihood as much as necessary to maintain body and soul together, one who is actually learned should live in human society unattached to family affairs, although externally appearing very much attached. So this is seemingly a contradiction here, because as we were mentioning earlier, that household life, family life is for one who is attached to material life. So here though, Narada Muni says one should live in human society unattached to family affairs, although appearing very much attached. So how are we to understand this? Remember, Narada is speaking to Yudhishthira, so he's not talking to a fool. He's talking to someone who's educated and trained in Vedic knowledge, Vedic culture, and besides that is also a pure devotee. So this audience that Narada is speaking to shows us that it's showing us the ideal, right? So Yudhishthira Maharaj is an ideal householder. As a pure devotee, he's also an ideal householder. And we hear in the first verse of this chapter how he, in that ideal consciousness refers to himself as grhastha, right? Someone who's completely ignorant of the goal of life. He's not ignorant of the goal of life. How could he be ignorant? He's a pure devotee, right? Pure devotee knows everything. But that's just part of being a pure devotee, is that you think you don't know anything, even though you know everything, right? And so in that mood, one can learn more when one has that humility and respect for the teacher, or for the speaker, for the guru. So this is the proper mentality. And because he has this, like Krishna says, pranipatena, right? Pariprashnena. Because he has this very submissive, humble mood, therefore Narada is naturally feeling, this person wants to learn something, even though he already knows everything. But he wants to learn something, and therefore he feels free to speak. Right? He's not thinking, well, how serious is this person? Do I have to watch what I say in front of him, or guard myself? Maybe in the future he's going to get upset with me if I tell him something that he doesn't want to hear. He's not thinking that. He's just able to speak the truth, right? So, in other words, this is a high level. This is a high level that Narada is speaking about here. And while working to earn his livelihood as much as necessary to maintain body and soul together, one who is actually learned, because Yudhishthira is actually learned, should live in human society unattached to family affairs, although externally appearing very much attached. Right? So, like our Guru Maharaj has explained that when devotees often ask him about how to deal with their occupation, if they're working in an office, or they're working in a business, or they're doing some kind of work in the world, how do you as a devotee conduct yourself in that situation? Because there are expectations. The world puts expectations on you, and if you don't meet them, then the world doesn't work for you, and you don't work for the world, right? So how do you do that? How do you so-called fit in to the material world, even though you're not from the material world and you're trying to go back to the spiritual world? So you may remember, as our Guru Maharaj has explained, and as I also tried to explain a few years ago, I gave a series of classes about, it was called, it was about Varnashram, but the title of the series of classes was called The Drama of Life. That's right, just trying to remember what it was. Yeah, the drama of life. So it's a very good metaphor to understand this whole system of Varnashram. It's like a drama. In a drama, you've got people on a stage and they're playing different roles. Someone's a king, someone's a cobbler, someone's a princess, someone's a knight in shining armour, but that's not really who they are. That role play that they're doing on the stage only exists for the time that the show goes on. And when the show finishes, and before the show starts, they're different people from those roles. But when they get on the stage, if they're going to put on a compelling drama, they have to get into the role, right? And they can get into the role almost to the point of just forgetting who they really are. And then it's a convincing drama, right? Then everybody applauds at the end. But if they don't play their role properly, if they don't get into it to some degree, then people are sitting in the audience and scratching their heads and yawning and walking out and stuff because they're just not getting their money's worth. So when it comes to the system of Varna and Ashram, then it's the same. It's just like a role play. That's how it's supposed to be. It's just like we're just playing roles in a drama, right? So externally, you appear to be very much into your role. It's like here in the context of the householder ashram, the householder man or woman, if they're working in the world, then they externally appear very much attached to that, right? And then everybody else who they're interacting with in society will be impressed. They'll be impressed, right? And they'll actually be able to function in a more or less harmonious way with the world. In other words, if you want to interact with the world, you can't just kind of walk along like, I don't know, some kind of Buddhist monk or something. Like, actually it's all Maya, it just doesn't exist, it's all an illusion. You can't do that. How are you going to function in the world like that? You can't. So if you are going to function in the world, which generally householder people do, then you have to, at least externally, you have to get into it. Yeah. You have to play your role properly in the drama. But, this is the but. If you're actually learned, then you should live in human society actually unattached to that role. In other words, your heart, where your heart's really at, is somewhere else. It's with Krishna. It's with hearing and chanting about Krishna. It's with associating with Krishna's devotees. That's really where your heart's at, right? So you keep that desire, even in household life, in the core of your heart. And yes, externally, you do very dutifully and very expertly all your duties of that particular role that you're playing. But you always remember in the core of your heart that actually this is not me. Right? This is just the role in the drama of life that I'm playing. And I'm playing it ultimately for Krishna. So you can remember that by following the previous advice that Narada has given. You associate with devotees in a respectful mood. You hear and chant about Krishna in their association. You inquire from them, how do I use the fruits of my work to please Krishna? And then the drama takes on real value. Then it actually becomes artha, something that gives meaning. Otherwise, like we hear in the first canto, shrama eva hi kevalam. You play your role in the drama of life perfectly, according to Varna and Ashram, but if you don't please Krishna, it's simply a useless waste of time. So Prabhupada talks, you'll notice actually in these purports that we're reading today, Prabhupada uses this word simple a lot. And that's the theme of our class today, simple living. So he says in this purport, he, meaning the household person who's actually learned, and he's understanding how he's under the grip of material nature, but he should actually be back in the spiritual world with Krishna. He says, a wise man, however, learns from the Shastras and Guru that we living entities are all eternal, but are put into troublesome conditions because of associating with different modes under the laws of material nature. He therefore concludes that in the human form of life, he should not endeavour for unnecessary necessities, but should live a very simple life, just maintaining body and soul together. Right? So this principle then, we hear it often, simple living, high thinking. Right? What does it actually mean? What is it referring to? Well, one way you can understand it, which is the way that I personally like to understand it, is simple living means your occupation. High thinking means your lifestyle. Simple living, that's your varna, and high thinking, that's your ashram. So simple living means one should not endeavour for unnecessary necessities, but should live a very simple life, just maintaining body and soul together. Right? So Prabhupada goes on, certainly one requires some means of livelihood, and according to one's varna and asrama, this means of livelihood is prescribed in the Shastras. One should be satisfied with this. Right? So then this principle of satisfaction is necessary for simple living. If there's no satisfaction, then your life's inherently going to become complicated. Right? Dissatisfaction brings complication. I need more, I need more, I need more. And then you have to work more to get it, right? And this way you complicate your life. And you've got no time or energy left over for associating with devotees and hearing about Krishna. So therefore Rupa Goswami, in the Nectar of Instruction, has said, Atyahara Prayasa. These two things, the first two things that will destroy your devotional service, Atyahara, over collecting, and Prayasa, over endeavouring. And of course they're connected. The more you want to collect, the more you have to endeavour. Right? The less you want to collect, the less you have to endeavour, generally speaking. So, Prabhupada says one should be satisfied with this. So whatever, as he says, whatever comes on its own, whatever means of livelihood just comes on its own. That's the principle. Therefore, instead of hankering for more and more money, a sincere devotee of the Lord tries to invent some ways to earn his livelihood, and when he does so, Krishna helps him. That's Prabhupada's advice on how to get a job for a devotee. Earning one's livelihood, therefore, is not a problem. The real problem is how to get free from the bondage of birth, death, and old age. Attaining this freedom and not inventing unnecessary necessities is the basic principle of Vedic civilization. One should be satisfied with whatever means of life comes automatically. Right? The modern materialistic civilization is just the opposite of the ideal civilization. Every day the so-called leaders of modern society invent something contributing to a cumbersome way of life that implicates people more and more in the cycle of birth, death, old age and disease. Right? So it's an inherently complicated society that we live in. And what is presented by the leaders of society as being something that's going to make your life easier, modern conveniences, actually has the opposite effect, actually makes your life more complicated. Even just look at the phenomena of cell phones. I don't know, do you guys remember life before cell phones? You would, right? Do you? Yeah. How old were you when cell phones came in?
My first phone when I was maybe 10.
10?
It was like a brick.
Oh yeah, so you were just still a kid. What about you, Balaram?
I was 18. 19.
A bit older. Mm. So life was just so much more simple and peaceful before cell phones. That was my memory. You just had a phone in the house, and all you could do on it was call someone or not call someone. It only had two functions. You either use it to call someone or you just don't call anyone when people call you. Right? And if people called you and you didn't want to answer them, you just didn't answer the phone. Or you took it off the hook. Right? Take the phone off the hook. So you always knew when someone was doing that because you'd ring them and it was just dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. No, it's doo-dee-dee-dee-dee. Yeah, so-and-so's got the phone off the hook. They must be in the spa or, watching a good movie or something, watching a video, back in the video days. Life was so simple. You just didn't have so many messages to constantly have to field. If you wanted to go and see someone, you just went and saw them. And if they weren't home, they weren't home. You might give them a call, but I think life was just so much more simple and peaceful. At least that was my memory of it. And of course, that's just calling and messaging. What about everything else that you can get on the phone? Does that make your life more peaceful? Social media, does that make your life peaceful? Social media really makes your life more peaceful, right? What about gaming? You can get games on your phone, right? Does that make your life more peaceful? Of course, there's other more obscene things you can also get on phones nowadays, which we won't discuss in this class. Does that make your life more peaceful? Just agitates your mind. So therefore Prabhupada says, and that's just one of the so-called conveniences that are supposed to make your life easier today. Right? AI is going to make your life easier. But how's your life easier if AI just took your job? Right. So Prabhupada says the modern materialistic civilization is just the opposite of the ideal civilization. It's presented, that's why it's called Maya, because it presents itself as being something that's for your benefit, but it's actually just the opposite. So therefore someone who's learned, they perform their occupation, whatever comes easily, they're satisfied with that, and they perform it properly. They perform it as if they're very much attached to that, like it's their life and soul. Like our Guru Maharaj says, you go to work and you're just, if you're a working person, yes, I go to the boss, I am here for you. But your heart's not really in that. Your heart's in Krishna consciousness and associating with devotees, hearing and chanting about Krishna. Go to the next verse. Gyataya Pitarau putra bratara suhrido pare yad vedanti yadichanti chanumodeta nirmamaha. An intelligent man in human society should make his own program of activities very simple. Notice Prabhupada's used that word again, simple. Right? If there are suggestions from his friends, children, parents, brothers, or anyone else, he should externally agree, saying, yes, that is all right. But internally, he should be determined not to create a cumbersome life in which the purpose of life will not be fulfilled. Right? So this is an example then of being externally attached, but internally simple, right? So naturally, in family life, there are so many suggestions from the family members. This is particularly speaking to the man here. So the man is usually the ox, right? The ox goes out and plows the field and produces the grains, right? The ox or the bull. Right? So in other words, the man in the traditional family is the breadwinner. And so naturally, he's like the cash register, for the family. And the family often are not satisfied with what the man can provide. Whether it's the friends of the family or the children or the parents, the brothers, anyone else. And so they're going to suggest to him, hey, you should get more money. Like Prabhupada explains here in the word Vedanti, they suggest. And then he says in brackets, in regard to one's means of livelihood. Hey, I've got an idea, Dad. Why don't you get a job doing this? You get more money. We need more money, right? So how should the family person deal with that? Just tell them, shut up. I'm the man of the house. I'm the boss of the family. Everything goes my way. Right? Actually, I'm detached. I'm detached from all of you. We're not the body. So Narada Muni's giving some advice. If there are suggestions, he should externally agree, saying, yes, that is all right. Right? So he's appearing to be very much attached. But internally, he should be determined not to create a cumbersome life in which the purpose of life will not be fulfilled. Right, so this is the example. So again, it's like a drama. It's like a drama. And whichever role in the drama we choose to play, then we should play it properly. So this is how you properly play the family role, particularly for the man of the family, according to Narada Muni. This is the principle. Now he's giving this specific example here. Go to the next verse. Divyam bhomam chantariksham vittam achyuta nirmatam tat sarvam upayunjana etat kuryat svato buddhaha. The natural products created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead should be utilized to maintain the bodies and souls of all living entities. The necessities of life are of three types: those produced from the sky, from rainfall, from the earth, from the mines, the seas or the fields, and from the atmosphere, that which is obtained suddenly and unexpectedly. So we won't read this purport, but the basic point Prabhupada makes is that all the necessities of life come from God through the medium of material nature, and all living entities should be provided for. So therefore greed is not allowed, because greed means that someone gets more than they need and someone misses out. Right? So the idea is that no, everybody should be provided for. And therefore, if everybody is satisfied with their particular allotment, everybody will be provided for. If people are greedy, then some people are going to get a lot more than they need and others are not going to get what they need. So that's not allowed. And so therefore, if you take more, as explained in the next verse, you get a reaction. Right? Take more than you need, you get a reaction. So that next verse is Yavad Briyeta Jataram Tabat Swatvam Hidehinam Adhikam Yo Bimanyeta Sustaino Dandam Arhati. One may claim proprietorship to as much wealth as required to maintain body and soul together, but one who desires proprietorship over more than that must be considered a thief, and he deserves to be punished by the laws of nature. So now Narada's going to explain, Prabhupada's going to elaborate on this in the purport and explain what happens when we get more than we need, not by greed or over-endeavouring, but just by providence. Sometimes it happens, right? So what should we do with that? We shouldn't take more than we need, but sometimes we just get more than we need, apparently, by accident. Of course, it's not by accident, but what should we do in that situation? So Prabhupada says, by God's favour we sometimes get large quantities of food grains or suddenly receive some contribution or unexpected profit in business. In this way we may get more money than needed. So how should that be spent? There is no need to accumulate money in the bank merely to increase one's bank balance. Such a mentality is described in Bhagavad Gita 16:13 as a surak, demoniac. Idam adya maya labdham, imam prapsye manoratam, idam astidam apime, bhavishyati punardanam. The demoniac person thinks, so much wealth do I have today, and I will gain more according to my schemes. So much is mine now, and it will increase in the future more and more. The asura is concerned with how much wealth he has in the bank today and how it will increase tomorrow. But unrestricted accumulation of wealth is not permitted either by the Shastra or in the modern age by the government. Actually, if one has more than one requires for his necessities, the extra money should be spent for Krishna. According to the Vedic civilization, it should all be given to the Krishna consciousness movement, as ordered by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 9:27. Yat karoshi yadashnasi, yajjuhoshi dadasi yat, yat tapasyasi konteya tat karushvamad arpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you perform, should be done as an offering unto me. Grihasthas should spend extra money only for the Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada goes on, the grhasthas should give contributions for constructing temples of the Supreme Lord and for preaching of Srimad Bhagavad Gita or Krishna consciousness all over the world. Shrinvan Bhagavato Bhikshnam Avatara Katamritam. In the Shastras, the Puranas and other Vedic literatures, there are so many narrations describing the transcendental activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and everyone should hear them again and again. For example, if we read the entire Bhagavad Gita every day, all 18 chapters, in each reading we shall find a new explanation. That is the nature of transcendental literature. The Krishna consciousness movement therefore affords one an opportunity to spend his extra earnings for the benefit of all human society by expanding Krishna consciousness. In India especially, we see hundreds and thousands of temples that were constructed by the wealthy men of society who did not want to be called thieves and be punished. This verse is very important. As stated here, one who accumulates more money than needed is a thief, and by the laws of nature he will be punished. One who requires more money than necessary becomes desirous of enjoying material comforts more and more. Materialists are inventing so many artificial necessities, and those who have money, being allured by such artificial necessities, try to accumulate money to possess more and more. This is the idea of modern economic development. Everyone is engaged in earning money, and the money is kept in the bank, which then offers money to the public. In this cycle of activities, everyone is engaged in getting more and more money, and therefore the ideal goal of life, the ideal goal of human life, is being lost. Concisely, it may be said that everyone is a thief and is liable to be punished. Punishment by the laws of nature takes place in the cycle of birth and death. No one dies fully satisfied by the fulfillment of material desires, for that is not possible. Therefore, at the time of one's death, one is very sorry, being unable to fulfill his desires. By the laws of nature, one is then offered another body to fulfill his unsatisfied desires, and upon taking birth again, accepting another material body, one voluntarily accepts the threefold miseries of life. So this is what happens when you have the opposite of simple living and high thinking, which is what we have today. What is the opposite of simple living and high thinking? Complicated living and no thinking. Right? And so that means you're punished by the laws of nature, meaning you take birth again, and then you take on another material body in the next life, and then you, as Prabhupada says, voluntarily accept the threefold miseries. Right? So definitely a devotee doesn't want to, at least a devotee of Yudhisthira Maharaj's caliber, doesn't want to be in that situation. So therefore, one may claim proprietorship to as much wealth as required to maintain body and soul together. Right? That's Narada's instruction to Yudhisthira. And remember, Yudhisthira is a king, so he's got a lot of money. He's the king of the world. He's not just like the king of, king of England or something. He's the king of the world. He's got piles, bucket loads, tons of money. And this is what Narada's telling him. Right? He's not talking to a poor person. He's talking to the king of the world. So the king then has to use, if you've got a lot, or like a king would have, then that all has to be used for Krishna's purposes. So whether you've got a lot like Yudhisthira or you've just got a little, the principle's the same. You can claim proprietorship to as much wealth as required to maintain body and soul together. Right? And you see with Yudhisthira's example that whether he's the king after the Rajasuya, right? He's the king of Indraprastha, he becomes the king of the world as well. So much wealth, right? But then, previous to that, when he's in the forest, when they were in exile, he's not disturbed. It's not like the Pandavas were in the forest with nothing, and they were just all agitated. Where's our wealth? No. They're just satisfied with he's actually just satisfied with whatever's required to maintain body and soul together, which is what he had in the forest. And then when he became the king and had so much wealth, he's still satisfied because he knows everything belongs to Krishna. So whether Krishna gives me a lot or Krishna gives me a little, doesn't matter. I'm satisfied in either situation because whatever I need, I've got. Krishna's given it to me. To be the king of the world, you need a lot of wealth. Right? How are you going to be the king of the world if you don't have a lot of money? How are you going to get stuff done? How are people going to respect you? So to do that service, Krishna gives him unlimited wealth. Said that he's practically like Lord Brahma in terms of his wealth. But he's satisfied in either case, whether he's the king of the world with unlimited wealth practically, or whether he's in the forest with eating roots and berries and sleeping on the ground. So that's the principle, to be satisfied with whatever Krishna gives. And that's what it means to be happy for a devotee, at least materially speaking. To be materially happy means to be satisfied with whatever you get automatically, and to just be satisfied with that without trying to, as we heard previously, over-endeavour for unnecessary necessities. It's interesting use of words there by Prabhupada. Unnecessary necessities. In other words, you think they're necessary, but they're actually unnecessary. So this is how people are victimised today in a consumer society. They're just convinced that they need so many things that they don't actually need, and therefore they should work to get the money to buy all those things. And in this way, the Vaishyas in society just exploit everybody. So any questions on this? Narada Muni's advice on simple living for the successful family person.
I have a question, Prabhu.
Mm-hmm.
So some devotees, they may even struggle to meet the basic necessities, for example, paying rent. So in that situation, how much should they endeavor and how much should they put their faith into Krishna that everything will be provided?
Can you just grab my thermos from that? Is the thermos just on the right hand side of that bench there? No, the right hand side. Right hand side? Is it? That one with the lid off. Is there one with the lid off? Yeah. Thank you. So the question is, if devotees are struggling to pay the rent, how much should they endeavour to pay the rent?
As an example, paying the rent. But yeah, the point is basic necessity.
Well, you're saying that they're struggling to pay the rent means they are paying it, right? They're not paying it.
Well, there's a lack of rental payment.
So who's paying it? Because they're staying somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're paying rent, and they're not paying enough rent, so that means someone else is paying for them. Right? So that's the situation. So your question is, how much should they endeavour?
And how much should they put the faith in Krishna that everything will be provided, as we have read from today's verses?
How much should they, the person who's not paying the rent, put faith in Krishna? Well, it's difficult to say without hearing the specifics of the situation. It's to know what's actually going on. So it's hard to give a very specific answer to that question. I'd have to see. We'd have to see whether they are endeavouring to their capacity.
Okay.
Because we can only endeavour as much as we can, But it's like Sudam Brahmana, he's sitting there in his shack with water dripping through the roof. And he goes out begging every day. But that's all he can do. So that's what Krishna's provided for him. So he's happy with it. He's paying the rent, kind of. But his wife's not happy with it. But his wife's not happy with it for her sake. She's not happy with it for his sake. Because that's the way in the Vedic family, that's the way it works. Is that like we were saying in the last class, then when there's education, spiritual education for the man and the woman before they marry, then they can actually have a productive family life, and they can be satisfied materially in any situation because of that spiritual education and training. But the way it would work would be that, the man gives everything to the husband gives everything to the wife gives everything to the husband, and so they both get everything. It's just they don't get everything by taking it, they get everything by giving it. So that's actually what it means to have a relationship, whether it's husband and wife, or parents and children, or employer and employee. That's the ideal, at least. So she's not satisfied with the situation, not for her. She's not satisfied with the situation for him. And then he's satisfied in the situation, but he's not satisfied because she's not satisfied. So then he goes to Krishna on her recommendation, or on her request. But the point is, he's taking up his responsibility. According to the Varna and Ashram, he's doing his responsibility. So we have to see, and so because he's doing his responsibility, he's satisfied. And so we have to see whether people are actually doing that in the specific situation. Are they actually being a responsible, whatever role it is that they're trying to play in the drama? So from the outside, that situation with Sudam Brahmana, it might look like he's being irresponsible. But he's a Brahmana. What do you expect him to do? Not everybody's the same. People have different psychologies, And actually, for Brahmanas, like Prabhupada explains, that they'll voluntarily keep themselves in a position of poverty. And you think, well, why would someone do that? But then he explains why. Do you remember why?
In that chapter about Sudama Brahmana specifically?
Not sure. It might be in that one. But he says they voluntarily keep themselves in a situation of poverty so that they don't get bewildered by material opulences. They don't want to be bewildered. It's an interesting strategy, right? To not get bewildered, just don't have anything. Then you've got nothing to be bewildered by, right? But you've got to have a certain psychology to be satisfied with that. So he had that. So therefore he's satisfied and doesn't have anything. And then when he gets everything, when Krishna gives him everything, he's still satisfied. Like his wife said to him before he went, that to Krishna, that Krishna, doesn't give people that are not qualified a lot of wealth, like devotees that are not qualified a lot of wealth, because they can be, sidetracked by that. But, you're obviously qualified for that, so. And then you can see Krishna gave him a huge amount of wealth. So he's satisfied in any situation. The principle is that he's satisfied with what he's doing. So if one is actually satisfied, one will just be satisfied in any situation. So back to your point about person not paying the rent, one has to see, well, what is the I mean, ideally, one would look at it from that perspective of varna and ashram and see what's the person's varna, what's the person's ashram, and therefore what are the responsibilities in relation to those roles, and then one would see is the person fulfilling those responsibilities, and then one can make a call. One can then evaluate, whether the person is, we could say, doing the best they can in the circumstance. All right. And if they're not doing the best they can, then it could be recommended to them that they need to endeavour more. And if they are doing the best they can, then that's all that's required, although it might not work in that specific situation, but it might work in another situation fine. Like, let's say the person's rent is $200 a week, but they can only do $150, but that's all they can do, right? Then, that might not work if they're staying, with Shivananda, but it might work if they're staying with me. Right? But to try and get them to endeavour more to stay with Shivananda, that might not be the best idea, because they're already doing as much as they can. So that's what I initially thought of when you said they're not paying the rent. It's like, well, how much is their rent? Do they have like a $1,600 apartment, overlooking Oriental Parade or or what? Because they just might be out of their range, But this principle of accepting the occupation that comes automatically, that's a good indication of what one can actually honestly afford. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Partially, the other part I may not have explained clearly. My question is that how should devotees balance trusting that things will be provided by Krishna, and yet we still need to endeavour?
Things are being provided by Krishna. It's not that things will be provided by him. Who do you think's providing now?
By having that consciousness to be able to...
Therefore you have to consider who's providing for you now, and who's provided for you up until now in this lifetime. Is it Krishna or is it someone else? So if Krishna's providing for everybody and he's provided for you up until now, why is he going to stop now? What's the reason? Why would you think Krishna's going to stop providing for you now?
I think it's the fear of... I think it's lack of faith and trusting Krishna in providing. So that's a fear that if you give up certain things, then Krishna is not going to... Or our desires may not be able to be satisfied.
No, one just has to work according to whatever the varna is. That's all. One doesn't have to change the varna. The varna generally doesn't change in one's life. The ashram is supposed to change. First of all, of course, one has to accept a proper ashram. That helps. And then you're supposed to move through them. That's the idea. So that changes generally, but the varna generally doesn't. Although as one gets older, then, and one goes more towards being a vanaprastha, then one will naturally become more inclined towards a Brahminical approach. Meaning that one would be more comfortable, with simplicity and more of just a focus on devotional service rather than sort of if one was a householder, then sort of like the household duties and everything. Right? One would be more inclined as one, this is always providing that people are actually serious about their Krishna consciousness, which is not always the case. But for a serious devotee who's, say, gone through household life for 25 years or something, and the kids are grown up and like that, then if they're serious, it'll be very natural for them to, even if they're not a brahmana, by nature for them to look towards a more Brahminical type of Brahminical type of occupation. At least it would be more simple, so that would be natural, because they're just, it's like, okay, I struggled with the mode of passion for 25 years, and it's just kind of, you're going to get it out of your system, and it's like, now what? So that's the idea. That's what vanaprastha is that you get it out of your system, and because you did it for Krishna, you actually have some realization. Because you did those duties as devotional service, you actually get some realization. Like I was saying in the last class, that generally people enter into household life. I think Shivananda asked that question: how does it work? Where you like take the thorn out with another thorn. That example, right? That people generally enter into household life and their expectations are way too high, right? But because if they're serious about Krishna consciousness, because they're doing that for Krishna, they're doing it as devotional service. In other words, it's being dovetailed in Krishna's service. There's realization, right? There's realization. I just saw that Kunja and Vraja joined the class. Oh, I'm so happy that you guys are here in this class, and I wanted to just wish you both all the best for your upcoming new service of caring for a new devotee. I hope everything goes very, very smoothly, and wishing you all the very best. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, thank you so much.
Hare Hare. So vanaprastha means that there's that realization is there from that service that one has done as a family person. That's the result of successful family life, is that one gets that realization. So it'll be very natural that that kind of someone in that situation would be more comfortable with like temple type activities, going to holy places, spending more time hearing and chanting, that kind of thing. But again, Vana might remain the same. So one doesn't have to change, right? That's what Ramananda Roy said to Lord Chaitanya: Stane stita shuddhikatam tanuvan manobi. Right? You stay in whatever material situation you're in, and you hear and chant about Krishna. And in this way, the Supreme Lord, who's ajita, unconquerable, becomes jitta, becomes conquered by you. Right? So one has to have some self-awareness. This whole system of Vana and Ashram is based on self-awareness. Whether you get that self-awareness yourself or whether it's given to you, which would be the traditional system, you have to have some self-awareness. Like, who am I? What can I do? What can I not do? What am I good at? What am I not good at? And then just be very practical about how to move forward in terms of one's occupation and lifestyle. Therefore, the basic principle then is bhakti is a guidance culture, right? Because we weren't born in traditional Vedic culture. We didn't go to the brahmachari ashram from the time we were 5. The ladies generally weren't trained, in chastity from a young age. So we don't have that kind of culture, we don't have that kind of training. So therefore, guidance is really the only way that we can get that self-awareness according to our situation, our specific situation, and know how to move forward. And it may change. That's true. As we get older. Our asrama may change as our realizations develop. But in family life, there's no rush to just abandon your family life. There's no rush, particularly in this age. It's not recommended. Lord Chaitanya's advice was to the Kurma Brahmin: you stay in your situation, you chant Hare Krishna, you teach others to chant Hare Krishna. Right? That's generally what's recommended. Anything else? Krishna Gopinath's got his little virtual hand up here. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the nice class. I'm just wondering, in terms of saving money in the bank, like the point that you made.
Yeah.
So, also we know the principle, like for example, like ideally 50% for Krishna consciousness, 25% for like I think family, and then 25% for emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if someone like earns more money, then it will also be like it could be that there's a lot of money saved up. Is that then a bad thing, or?
Is it a bad thing to save money?
Yeah, like in that. Like if it's for emergencies and just practicality.
Yeah. Well, that's right. You have to have some money for that. Again, it depends. That's why you have to discuss the person's varna, because without discussing the varna, you can't just give a one-dimensional answer to that, because people are different. Varna means people are different. They have different psychologies. So, what constitutes, you could say financial security for one person doesn't necessarily constitute that for another person or another family. People are different. So the principle is fine. But it's just that probably each individual just has to again have that self-awareness, and then make a plan forward. But in family life, you're not just dealing with yourself, you're dealing with at least one other person, generally a few others as well. So everybody has to be happy with how the family defines financial security. Therefore, in the traditional system, a lot of care is taken in marriages so that the psychology of the persons is more or less harmonious, so that they just, by nature, they have at least a similar definition of these things. Right. Otherwise, if you're trying to work with someone, you're like Sudam Brahman, but your wife is, like Queen Rukmini, Princess Rukmini, right? There's going to be some family problems. There's going to be quite a few lengthy discussions, and maybe a few other things as well, right? Because it's hard for people to change, particularly when they're older. Like it's like I said, we didn't have generally training as a brahmachari from a young age, or chastity from a young age. So it's difficult enough to change even with that. What to speak of without it? So therefore, it's smart to take guidance on how to, if one is considering family life, on how to actually find a partner who one can work with. Take guidance, and also take your time. Don't be in a hurry. Family life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So 20 years, 25 years or more is a long time to spend with someone that you don't really get on with, or who you see you don't have a shared vision of these things, more or less, with, right? But the point that Prabhupada's making, that I'm getting from this this last purport we read, is that if one gets, he says, by God's favour we sometimes get large quantities of food grains, or suddenly receive some contribution or unexpected profit in business. In this way we get more money than needed. That's the point. How much do we actually need? And that's different for different people, according to the Varna. So that has to be just considered, seriously considered. How much do we actually need? I remember I got an inheritance back in, I think, 2014 or 15 or something, an unexpected inheritance of about $35,000 or something. And it was from my great aunt, who I met twice, I think. And she had quite a bit of money. She divided it up amongst, I think, 22 relatives, and each one got, I think, about 35,000 New Zealand dollars each. So I was thinking, well, what to do with that? So that's the money that I used to buy the sound system, all the sound gear for Bhakti Lounge. Right. Because I already had enough money. So I thought, what am I going to do with it, you know? And as it turned out, that sound system is still there. It's done. We've only replaced one major component in that sound system, which was last year, which was, and that was another like nearly $3,000 that we put towards that. Sound gear's not cheap, perfectly good sound gear. So it's done great service for Bhakti Lounge, I can see, over the years. And I could have thought, well, maybe I'll just give that money to Bhakti Lounge. Probably that would have been a more Brahminical thing to do. But at the same time, I was also thinking, like Gurudev told me that many, many years ago, he said, if you can't see how to improve things in the situation you're in, then why do you think you're going to be able to see how to improve things somewhere else? Right? And so I thought, yeah, well, there's nobody here that knows anything about sound. Really. You know, devotees at Bhakti Lounge, from what I see, are generally pretty tech challenged, you know. So, you know, I thought, well, no one's going to do it. If I don't do it, no one's going to do it, and we're just going to be stuck with, you know, the very budget kind of approach. So I thought, oh, maybe that's a way that I can improve things and use that Lakshmi for Krishna. And it's definitely been used. You know, so it's used for the festivals, it's used for Bhakti Lounge. And it definitely made it, at least to me, it made a huge difference to the actual presentation. So, yeah, so, you know, sometimes that happens. We just unexpectedly get something, and so we should just, at least at that time, you know, we should consider, you know, what's the best use of these resources? They're Krishna's resources, so what's the best way to use them? Yes, I definitely need some money to provide for myself, and if I'm in a family situation, then for my family. So what do we actually need? You know, some people need a lot. Some people need hardly anything. Everybody's different. There's no one size fits all. So every family just has to work that out. Right? And if you want to, you can do like you know Yudhisthira Maharaj is doing. You can ask for guidance from a devotee. Right? And if you're very sincere and humble like Yudhisthira, you might get an honest answer, like he did from Narada Muni. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Good question. All right, gentlemen and ladies. I think there's a lady still here on the call. Thank you for your company today. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Have a great day. Hari Hari.